Fort Knox is synonymous with security. It's the place where America's gold reserves are stored. But are those legendary vaults actually empty? President Trump and Elon Musk want to see for themselves.
We're going to go into Fort Knox to make sure the gold is there. Don't be totally surprised. We open the door, we'll say, there's nothing here. They stole this too. We're actually going to Fort Knox to see if the gold is there, because maybe somebody stole the gold. Tons of gold.
Conspiracy theories that America's gold reserves at Fort Knox have been stolen go back decades.
Goldfinger.
The classic James Bond movie Goldfinger featured a raid on Fort Knox using a high-powered laser, ultimately foiled by 007. Doug Simmons is one of the few people on Earth who have seen the gold. He worked at Fort Knox for 11 years. His job, moving the gold from vault to vault during audits.
If someone was to go in there and remove all that ore, it would take a massive operation with a lot of vehicles, and someone would have noticed it.
In 2017, Kentucky Senator and Majority Leader Mitch McConnell was shown the vault. There's the gold behind him. He even signed his name on the wall. Okay, but is the gold still there today?
The American people can rest assured that their money is safe inside that building.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحیم. الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام علی.
اگر با مردم ایران، با ملت ایران با زبان احترام و کرامت صحبت بشه، طبیعی هستش که با همون زبان هم پاسخ داده خواهد شد. آنچه که ما تا الان دیدیم غیر از برخی کلمات خوب که در کنارش تهدید به حمله نظامی که خود اونها هم میدانند هیچ موضوعیتی نداره و قابلیت‌های ایران در واکنش رو به خوبی میدانند، غیر از اینها چیزی ندیدیم الا سندی که امضا شده و کاملا روشن و واضح هست که سیاست اونها چه هست. ما خودمون رو با همون سیاست تنظیم میکنیم، تحت فشار حداکثری و تحت تهدید به هیچ وجه مذاکره نخواهیم کرد. این که در جلسه بعدی شورای حکام ایشون در گزارش خودش گزارش جامع رو هم ضمیمه میکنه یا نه، خب بستگی به آژانس داره. ظاهرا ایشون اعلام کردن که چنین قصدی ندارن، ما هم استقبال میکنیم.
از سفری برگشتید به جمهوری اسلامی ایران کردن که خدمت شما برسم. ایننی اختصرت زیارتی ما وارد مرحله نزدیک با همه کشورهای اسلامی هست روی استضافتكم هنا في طهران. سیاست
تهدید دیگران هم نقض فاحش حقوق بین الملل و منشور ملل متحد هست و همین که در رابطه با کشوری مثل جمهوری اسلامی ایران پاسخش این هست که هیچ غلطی نمیتوانند بکنند. ایران و لبنان باید با توجه به سابقه روابطشون و با توجه به منافع متقابل بهترین تصمیم رو در این رابطه بگیرن و اجازه ندن که طرفهای ثالثی که به هیچ عنوان خیر و صلاح هیچ یک از دو ملت و کل منطقه رو نمیخوان تاثیرگذاری بکنن بر مراودات لبنان با سایر کشورها. گفتگو ادامه داره و امیدواریم که بتونیم به یک راه حل معقول که منافع مردم لبنان و جمهوری اسلامی رو تأمین کنه در این رابطه برسیم. خیر.
Currently, I'm a no. There's about 5 of us that are no. I'm not sure why we're going for this vote right now. I'd love to, the 5 of us would love to. It seems that we've all kind of not been included in some of these discussions, and I think that would be the optimal thing to do.
You can't cut taxes without cutting spending, and they're not really cutting spending. They're cutting taxes by $450 billion and cutting spending by $150 billion. That leaves you $300 billion you're going to add to the deficit compared to the CBO baseline. I know there's some people don't want to use the baseline conveniently after 30 years of using the baseline. In there, they're trying to comfort some of the more moderate members and say, oh no, we're not doing anything to Medicaid with this bill.
Now what? That's probably the big question.
So
now what? There's a vote.
I feel like we were elected. Who disagrees with work requirements for single able-bodied recipients of Medicaid? Like, that's a 70-30, maybe 90-10 issue in America, and they're afraid to put that in writing? Give me a break.
Donald Trump's avalanche of executive actions and institutional overhaul has reached the doorsteps of the U.S. Postal Service. But mail carriers in the country have not taken it well. Protests erupted on Monday on the streets of Washington, D.C. Hundreds of workers from the Union of National Association of Letter Carriers demonstrated against Trump's remarks, suggesting a takeover of the government agency.
Engineering and math, or STEM fields. Over 15,000 middle schoolers in 15.
Maybe we shouldn't be too surprised by this. Look at what we've seen over the last 30 days. I think it's very clear this administration has no interest in protecting public service, working people, or really the public good. They want to throw us away to create an unreliable, inefficient, expensive private delivery service. And what do we say to that? Hell no!
Last week, while taking questions from the media, Trump said that he was considering merging the U.S. Postal Service with the U.S. Commerce Department. The change would effectively mean dissolving the leadership of the U.S. Postal Service.
Well, we want to have a post office that works well and doesn't lose massive amounts of money. And we're thinking about doing that, and it'll be a form of a merger, but it'll remain the Postal Service, and I think it'll operate a lot better than it has been over the years. It's been just a tremendous loser for this country.
The U.S. postal sector is a $1 trillion industry. The USPS actively employs more than 500,000 people across the country and caters to nearly 167 million residences, businesses and post office boxes. And our correspondent Susan Teherani has sent us this report from New York.
Postal workers across the United States are protesting President Donald Trump's proposal to overhaul the U.S. Postal Service, the USPS. The administration is now considering measures like merging the USPS with the Commerce Department, and also potential privatization as well, citing financial losses. Now, unions and employees have expressed concern that these changes could ultimately lead to reduced services, especially in rural areas and hard-to-get places, and also decreased jobs and wages. Rallies have been held in Washington, D.C., Portland, and other cities, and participants are emphasizing the essential public service role of the U.S. Post Office, opposing this measure to diminish its independence. Susan Tehrani reporting from New York for WION World is One.
The United States remove its nuclear weapons from Europe. The nightmare situation is haunting Europeans, with the Trump administration repeatedly pressing Europe that it should carry the burden of its own security. European leaders are only openly looking for alternative protection within the continent. This is the moment when Europe finally takes its defense into its own hands. Here's a report.
Missile strikes have been a key feature of Russia's offensive in Ukraine since the beginning of the war. Many of the systems it fires at the country are capable of also delivering nuclear warheads. From Kinzhal to Oreshnik, Russia has repeatedly used nuclear-capable missiles with conventional payloads. The West too kept raising the nuclear rhetoric, with the US announcing the deployment of long-range missiles in Germany by 2026 to bolster NATO's deterrence against Russia. Ever since the advent of nuclear arms, Europe has been protected by an American nuclear umbrella. It was the United States that promised NATO allies that any nuclear aggression by the Soviet Union and later by Russia would be answered with a barrage of US missiles, which are stored in Germany, Belgium, the Netherlands, Italy and Turkey. For 7 decades, this arrangement allowed Western Europe to focus on recovering from the devastation of the 20th century's 2 world wars instead of developing costly nuclear capabilities. Only France and the UK developed small national arsenals, and they were just a fraction of the size of those controlled by the Cold War superpowers. Russia possesses a total of 5,889 nuclear warheads, the largest confirmed stockpile of nuclear warheads in the world, while the Americans have 5,224 nukes in their arsenal. Now, as Trump shifts US foreign policy, the American nuclear umbrella could slowly diminish, leaving Europe vulnerable. Germany sees the writing on the wall. Friedrich Merz, likely to become Germany's next chancellor, calls for a new nuclear security structure led by the UK and France. According to reports, France says it is ready to use its nuclear deterrent to help protect Europe. Fighter jets carrying nuclear weapons could be deployed to Germany. The big question, will the US really move its troops and nukes from Europe as it increasingly keeps going closer into Russia's embrace? The entire European security matrix would go haywire, and the scramble is on to prepare for the future. Bureau Report, WION World is One.
The Brandenburg Gate, once the frontier between East and West Berlin during the Cold War, was lit up Monday in blue and yellow, marking the 3rd anniversary of Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine. The renewed threat from Moscow formed the backdrop to the German elections on Sunday, won by the centre-right Christian Democrats.
I hope that the new government will continue to supply weapons to Ukraine, that it will work together with the European states to develop a major counterweight to Russia and now also to Trump.
Zu Russland und jetzt auch zu Trump entwickelt wird.
US President Donald Trump has overseen a dramatic change in US policy on Ukraine, recently blaming Kyiv for starting the war. Washington has said European security is no longer a priority. After his victory in Sunday's German election, the Christian Democrats leader Friedrich Merz said the Trump administration, quote, does not care much about the fate of Europe.
It is clear that we Europeans must now be able to act very quickly, and that we must also organize our own defense capability very quickly.
Das ist ein Thema, das absolute Priorität hat in den nächsten Wochen.
Merz is a strong supporter of transatlantic ties, and his words mark a seismic shift for Germany and Europe, says analyst Mattia Nelles.
We are, as Germany, shocked by the end of and utterly unprepared for the end of the Pax Americana, the end of America providing security for Europe. And we now find ourselves in a difficult position to organize the transition away from US being the leading provider of security to a more European-driven approach, not just to Ukraine, but to organizing our own self-defense. But Merz has said he's willing to lead on that. And let's see whether we are able to step up.
Can Europe afford to pay for its own defence? Merz will have to change his fiscal stance, says analyst Liana Fix.
He can agree to joint debt on the European level, which the Conservatives always hated. And he can agree to seizing Russian force assets, which has not been done so far, but should be done soon. He has talked about the UK and France having to extend the nuclear umbrella to Germany as a possible pathway.
The Christian Democrats are well short of a majority. Merz has ruled out forming a coalition with the far-right Alternative for Germany, or AfD party, which came second with a record 20.8% in the Sunday vote. The centrist party's so-called firewall around the AfD has been strongly criticised by Washington.
We consider this blockade to be undemocratic. You cannot exclude millions of voters per se.
Instead, Merz is to begin coalition talks with the Social Democrats of outgoing Chancellor Olaf Scholz. In addition to defence spending, cutting migration and boosting Germany's ailing economy will likely dominate the discussions. Henry Ridgewell, VOA News.
Our next story is from West Asia. Is the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu searching for a third conflict zone? The reason that question is being asked is because Netanyahu has demanded the complete demilitarization of much of southern Syria. In fact, it's an announcement that could potentially make conflict between Israel and the new leadership in Syria more likely. Netanyahu's warning comes after former President Bashar al-Assad's regime was already toppled in December last year, remember? And in a speech to Israeli military cadets on Sunday, Netanyahu warned basically that Israel would not allow the forces of Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, HTS, nor the new Syrian army to enter the area south of Damascus. Listen in.
We will not allow forces of the HTS or the new Syrian army to enter the territory south of Damascus. We demand full demilitarization of southern Syria in the provinces of Quneitra, Dara, and Sueda from the new regime's forces. In addition, we will not tolerate any threat to the Druze sect in southern Syria.
Now, just for context here, former Al-Qaeda affiliate HTS took control of Damascus on the 8th of December in a stunning offensive. The offensive had ended the then President Bashar al-Assad's rule, as you would know by now, prompting Israel to move forces into a UN-monitored demilitarized zone within Syria. Now, Netanyahu has said that Israeli forces will keep its positions there as a defensive measure and for as long as necessary. And this is a change in Israel's strategy. Just days after Bashar al-Assad was ousted in December, Israel invaded border villages in Syria, remember. But the Israeli raids continued throughout January and into February. And this has raised fears among Syrians that the Israeli incursions could become a prolonged military occupation. The Israeli troops, in fact, have been targeting villages, particularly ones with military outposts. And the Israel military raids have terrified the villagers who, like other Syrians, had celebrated the ouster of Bashar al-Assad. And now celebrations in this part of Syria have quickly dissipated into fear of an encroaching foreign army. Until now, Israel had described its move into the UN-monitored demilitarized buffer zone in Golan Heights as a temporary measure. In fact, Israel had justified its stand, saying it is to ensure the security of Israelis on the other side. The apparent rationale was the prevention of extremist groups from moving down to the Golan. But with his latest comments, Netanyahu has made it clear that he believes that the new authorities in Syria could represent a whole new danger. Remember, Israel seized most of the Golan from Syria during the 1967 West Asia War and later annexed. The move was not recognized internationally, although the US did so in 2019. And now Syria's new interim president and HTS leader, Ahmad al-Shara, tried to reassure Israel that he does not want conflict. Al-Shara has said that he is ready to uphold the long-standing disengagement agreement between the two countries, concluded after another war in 1973. He also stressed that he will not allow Syria to be used as a base for attacks against Israel. But al-Shara has also called on Israel to withdraw from the buffer zone it has taken as he tries to assert sovereignty across the whole of Syria's fractured landscape. Clearly, Netanyahu does not care about it, it seems. According to Etana, which is a Syrian reporting and analysis organization, Israeli forces continue to conduct cross-border incursions into Syria with bulldozers and armored vehicles. Israeli forces have also reportedly raided former Syrian army bases in the southern provinces of Quneitra and Dara. What this suggests, according to experts, is that Israel may be expanding and entrenching its occupation. Already, Israel's incursions and taking off the buffer zone in the Golan Heights violates the 1974 agreement between the two countries. And now the Israeli incursions have also been condemned internationally. In January, the United Nations said, and I'm quoting now, Syria's sovereignty, territorial integrity and territorial unity and integrity must be fully restored. And in December, the United Nations Special Envoy for Syria called on Israel to halt its very troubling military attacks. Even al-Shara has criticized Israel for its incursions, saying that it was a violation of the 1974 armistice agreement. From the perspective of the new Syrian leadership, freeing the country from the influence of all the foreign powers that jockeyed for position during the long years of the civil war is vital to ensure a more positive future for the country. But now Israel may present a more immediate challenge to Syria's new leadership, with Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu provoking Syria in a way with his statements and military actions. Is Netanyahu searching for another conflict zone?
Now, Israel has called for complete demilitarization of South Syria, warning its new rulers against deploying their military south of Damascus. Referring to Islamist group Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, which spearheaded the offensive that toppled Bashar al-Assad in December, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said his country will not allow forces from the HTS group or the new Syrian army to enter the area south of Damascus.
We will not allow forces from HTS or the new Syrian army to enter areas south of Damascus. We demand the complete demilitarization of southern Syria, including in the Quneitra, Dara, and Suwaida provinces, from the new regime forces.
Now, addressing a military graduation, Netanyahu further added that the Israeli forces will remain in the buffer zone for an indefinite period to protect our communities and to thwart any threat.
In Syria, IDF forces will remain on the peak of Mount Hermon and in the buffer zone for an indefinite period to protect our settlements and prevent any threats.
Netanyahu's comments led to new concerns over the Israeli presence in the swathes of southern Syria as Syria's new leaders attempt to consolidate control after years of civil war. Further, Defense Minister Israel Katz added that Israeli forces have built 2 posts on the peak of Mount Hermon and another in 7 some 7 more in other buffer zones to ensure defense and offense against any challenge. Netanyahu's government has been under pressure to protect Israelis living near border areas in the north. Katz said Israel will strengthen ties with friendly populations in the region, notably the Druze, a religious minority who live in both southern Syria and in Israel's Golan Heights, where Druze navigate their historically Syrian identity while living under Israeli rule. Netanyahu said Israel will not tolerate any threat to the Druze community in southern Syria. After the fall of the Assad regime in December last year, Israel announced that its troops were entering a UN-patrolled buffer zone that has separated Israeli and Syrian forces on the strategic Golan Heights since 1974. Israel seized much of the Golan Heights from Syria in a war in 1967, later annexing the area in a move largely unrecognized by the international community.
Mr. Fawad Izadi is an associate professor, Faculty of World Studies, University of Tehran. He's now joining us live from Tehran. Mr. Izadi, welcome to the show. What sort of alert level has been raised in Iran following this fear of an attack on the country's nuclear sites? What are the authorities in Iran saying about this matter?
You know, Iran's military is quite powerful. Iran attacked Israel 2 times after Israel attacked Iran. And a third round of attack could come anytime if Israel is foolish enough to attack Iran again. So people are not worried. The capabilities are quite extensive. The capabilities are indigenously produced. So the missile system, defense system that are produced internally actually have worked better than the versions that Iran has gotten from Russia. And the military people in Iran are watchful. We are dealing with governments that have engaged in genocide. Israelis have engaged in a genocide. Americans have engaged in a genocide in Palestine. And when the other side are the genocidal regimes, you always have to be careful. The reason they have not repeated what they did in Gaza and Lebanon in Iran is because of Iran's military capabilities. Yes.
All right, finish your point.
Based on what I know, the people here are going around doing their business. This is not something that is in people's mind, given the fact that Iran has shown that they are capable of defending the country, the military, and they are willing to use that capability to respond to any attack that comes from outside.
Mr. Izadi, I also understand the Russian Foreign Minister, Sergei Lavrov, was in Iran and met with your country's foreign minister. Was there any mention of this matter? Because I know and I understand that this was a crucial and critical matter in Iran in their talks. And what was the significance of the Russian tour to Iran?
You know, Iran-Russia relations have been quite good for decades. We have faced similar difficulties. Russia is under American sanctions. Iran is under American sanctions. With the new Trump administration, I think the nature of U.S.-Russia is changing. And I think one of the reasons Mr. Lavrov was in Tehran to provide a report to the countries that have been supportive of Russia in the defense of the country. This is something customary in diplomatic world, that when new things happen, the friends of that country are briefed. And I think one reason the Russian foreign minister is in Tehran is to do that briefing. As you reported, one of the issues that they discussed was the nuclear agreement. The United States left the agreement when Trump was president last time. And the Russian position is that there could be a chance to save the nuclear agreement. And this is Iran's position as well. Iran has been asking the United States to return to the agreement, and Europeans also. They did not officially leave the agreement, but in practice they did. So that's what Iran has been saying, especially the Pezeshkian administration has been telling the other side that when you sign an agreement, you need to adhere to it. And this Iran and Russia are hoping for. To be honest with you, I'm not very optimistic, given the nature of the regime in Washington. But diplomats are in business of talking, negotiating, and reaching peaceful resolutions, and hopefully the other side is available to do that.
All right, Mr. Fawad Izadi, it's always good to talk to you. Thank you very much for your insights. We'll have to leave it there. Thank you for talking to us today.